We're live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Vesuvius public hearing, March 29th, 2022 at 2 p.m. in council chambers. I first of all need a motion, please, to approve the special open agenda for today. Councillor King, Councillor Rhodes, all in favor. Thank you. And I will now read the statement of the chair of this public hearing. The public hearing is convened pursuant to section 464 of the Local Government Act, RSBC 2015, to allow the public to make representation to council respecting matters contained in zoning amendment bylaw number 1294.04/2022. Every person present who believes that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. None of you will be discouraged or prevented from making your views known. However, it is important that you restrict your remarks to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. If you wish to speak once, it is time for public representation and are attending in person, please proceed to the microphone and commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. If you wish to speak and are attending virtually, please virtually raise your hand. If you are unsure how to do so, you can find the information on the town's website, vesuvius.ca/public hearings. It will be your turn to speak once your name or phone number has been called. Your microphone will be unmuted and you may commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address. Once you have finished speaking, your microphone will be muted. If they wish, members of council may ask you questions following your presentation. However, the function of council at this public hearing is to listen to you rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In accordance with the council procedure bylaw, presentations by members of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 5 minutes each. If a person has additional information that they are unable to provide within that time frame, they shall be given further opportunity to address council after all other interested members of the public have been heard a first time. Please refrain from applause or other expressions of emotion during this public hearing so that we may ensure as impartial a hearing as possible. After this public hearing is adjourned, council members will not speak to the public on this matter until after the matter has been dealt with at a public meeting. After this public hearing has concluded, council may, without further notice, give whatever effect council believes proper to the representations made at this meeting. So I will ask our corporate officer to confirm the notice requirements.
So notice of the public hearing is given in accordance with the Local Government Act and the Community Charter by distributing the notice as follows. Publishing in 2 consecutive editions of the Times Chronicle on March 16th and March 23rd of 2022. Placing the notice on the bulletin boards in the town office and the Planning and Development Services Department on March 16th of 2022. And posting the notice on the town's website and distributed via e-news on March 16th. And notices were mailed out on March 11th of 2022 and hand delivered within a 60-meter radius on March 16th.
Thank you, Mrs. Hilson. Would you do the summary of the staff report, please?
Yes, the purpose of the meeting is to seek public input on the zoning amendment bylaw number 1294/04/2022, which received first and second reading on March 8th. The proposed rezoning amendment is to rezone the foreshore from a W1 public water use to a W3 group strata moorage, and to allow for a marina facility with a maximum of 60 boat slips for the upland property owners at 8,000 Cottonwood Drive.
Thank you very much. So I will now ask for the staff report, please. Ms. McKay.
Thank you, Mayor McCordoff. Council will recall that you recently approved a rezoning proposal for the upland portion of this property located at 8,000 Cottonwood Drive. That new development will provide 58 residential units in a mix of single-family, townhome, and condominium-style dwelling units. The developers are seeking council support for a strata marine facility with a maximum of 60 boat slips. The draft marina shown in attachment B is for illustrative purposes only, and I'm going to speak to that as well. So you'll note that the W3 zone, as is currently written in the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw for the town, identifies one berth per 2 upland residential strata units. So in order to accommodate the 60 units that are being proposed, that is 60 slips, they're recommending they've applied for a text amendment to the W3 zone as well. So now, final design of the marina will in fact will determine the actual number of slips in conjunction with provincial regulations. So although the schematic that's provided to you for illustrative purposes only identifies 60 slips, I have spoken with the design team at Trademark and also with the provincial government representatives, and it's very unlikely that they would get possibly 40, 45 slips at best. So now I'll speak to a little bit more about that in a sec as well. So the upland property again is encumbered with 2 covenants, and council has previously discussed this. Those covenants were registered on title as part of the previously approved CD7 zone, which was for the Indigo development proposal. The intent of those covenants was to prevent the Strata Marine facility from locating the foreshore. A request to council to authorize discharging of these covenants would be presented at the time that final adoption of the amending bylaw, that is this amending bylaw we're discussing today, was being considered by council. Staff are supportive of removing the covenants as they were specific to the development proposal that was previously approved, that is the CD7 zone. And in fact, in the body of the covenants, it does say that they're specific to that rezoning application. So this new marina facility would be similar in nature to Strata Marine developments to the south and will serve the needs of the residents of the new development. Now, the provincial approval process for the Strata Morge used within the Foreshore Reseuss Lake ensures that the development adheres to the best practices and which includes baseline marine habitat assessments at the discretion of the province. I think it's important to note that no commercial activity is permitted within group strata morgue sites, including the renting or selling of berths. And of course, they can also charge membership fees through the strata if they choose, but that's not considered commercial activity. Now, the upland owners are the Cottonwood Lakeshore Developments, and the applicant is Joshua Hall, who I see is with us today. And the civic address is of course 8,000 Cottonwood Drive pertaining to the foreshore area. And the purpose of this report was to request that council consider third reading, of course, subject to comments received here at the public hearing. So options before council again, following the public hearing, were to grant third reading would be option number 1. Option 2, council determines that consideration of zoning amendment bylaw 1294.04/2022 should take place at a later date, or that council defeats the bylaw at third reading. Again, subject to comments, staff are requesting that council consider option number 1. So implications again to the community, the Cottonwood Drive area is developed with several multifamily condominiums and townhomes, most of which have strata morgue facilities which have been approved by the province. The proposed marina is aligned with current development of the foreshore along this stretch of the Reseuss Lake, and the community benefits from cohesive developments within a given area of town. I would like to point out that there are some discrepancies between what's currently approved in that area from the province and what would actually align with our foreshore lake zoning bylaw. And I'll speak to that, and our council can ask questions. So organizationally, the applicant will continue to work with the province on approval of the marina, and planning staff will provide information to the province as requested. Again, planning staff will bring forward a report at consideration of final adoption, requesting removal of the covenants on the upland property. The proposed marina has no impact to the town's budget. Improvements to the park may be considered in the future, inclusive of swim grids. And so council is aware, the applicants for the rezoning have suggested that they would contribute $5,000 towards the design of the park and an additional $20,000 towards implementing the works for the park, specifically a swim grid system in front of the park there. So they're happy to contribute to that. And I've spoken with Director Davis about this, and $20,000 is more than enough to implement the swim grids that would be necessary at that park. So again, as identified by the Director of Corporate Services, notices of the public hearing were placed in the Times Chronicle on March 16th, and again on March 23rd. And then notification of public hearing was mailed to the registered owners on March 11th and hand delivered on March 16th to tenants in occupation of those properties within a 60-meter radius of the. And then again, notices were placed on the notice board at Town Hall and the Planning Development Departments on March 16th. Sustainability, an approved strata marine in this location prevents the placement of private buoys and anchors within the foreshore area. Now, just a couple quick things I just wanted to note. You know, when we talk about sustainability, taking your boat in and out of the lake versus leaving your boat in the lake can also be of benefit to the foreshore area, and also prevents the bottlenecking of the boat launch, and of course, the driving of boats back and forth from one side of town to the other to access that particular marine facility, which is our public boat launch. I have spoken with the province on this particular application and on our foreshore zoning bylaw in general. And they did identify that they have some items that they would like to see us update in the foreshore and lake zoning bylaw moving forward, specifically in the W3 or the group strata moorage designation. We state that a facility shall not extend any greater distance than 30 meters from the high water line of Spears Lake. Well, the truth is that if you were to implement that, it would be not only difficult to put in a marina, but you would actually be putting the marina in closer to the foreshore, which is exactly what they want to see people try to avoid. So in this particular case, well, it's unlikely that the marina would look anything like what was originally drafted for conversation purposes. You couldn't put a marina in that 30 meters. So we would be coming back later and having a conversation with council specifically about that, and not just as it pertains to this particular development. But if we look at all of the developments along Cottonwood Drive, we see that Solvita has their marine facility extends over 76 meters into the lake. Casa de Lagos 69 to 70 meters into the lake. And then the development closest to the subject property is actually extends 73 meters into the lake. So if something were to happen to those marine facilities, or they needed improvements or updating, or some sort of wave action were to damage them, they could not be replaced under our current bylaws. So essentially, they're all non-conforming at this particular time. So following today's public hearing, staff in the Planning Development Department will continue to do a little bit of additional research and look at what might have been a better way to approach this this section in the W3 or strata moorage section of the zoning bylaw. I note that a public dock, a private dock rather, so say for example, one of our council members or one of the public members in the community had a foreshore property, you're actually allowed to extend your dock 42 meters into the lake. So it's interesting that there's contradicting statements in the bylaw that contradict provincial regulations, but also the difference between the different zones. Very briefly, I'd like to also mention that the applicant is looking to design the dock in such a way that the fingers would point towards the north, so that the entrance into the marine facility would not be in front of the foreshore of the public park. So I think that that's all, and then I would just ask if anybody has any questions.
Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there any, because you're gonna be disturbing all the ground, what about riparian areas? And I know of other areas where they've tried to do a little bit of work and also they lose kind of their property to repair. Because you're disturbing all that with the docking.
Right, well, thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. So basically, the province is the one that directs those kind of studies that have to be undertaken, or any repair works that they think for returning to natural state for the foreshore area. So that's not something that we would look at. However, the applicant is required to retain the services of a qualified environmental professional to prepare an environmental assessment of the foreshore. So they have done that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Two questions about how deep is the water there in front of the park?
Well, that's a very good question. That's also the reason, thank you again, Councillor King through the chair, that extending a marina 30 meters into the lake does not actually provide any moored facilities, is because that particular part of the lake is extremely shallow. I can't say for sure. I have swam there. I mean, I can say I go that far and it's not over my head, but I can't tell you how deep the lake is there. It is something, of course, that Trademark would have a better idea. I'm not sure if they'll be joining us. And I'm not sure if Josh can speak to that either, the applicant, when he has a chance to speak. But
Okay, then my second question is, when did the provincial government update their bylaws pertaining to this particular type of zoning?
well, the small craft harbors in Thompson, Okanagan, the technical guidance on the applications was last updated in October of 2018. However, it has not changed with respect to the length of those marinas, because basically they keep the length of the marina approvable, unless it's outside of the edge of the navigable waters, and then NAFN gets involved. But anything within that area is considered the foreshore of the town. In other words, the area that we're allowed to zone or have some sort of in control over, is about 100 to 120 meters.
Okay, and one last little question. It seems kind of funny that you have 58 units and you ask for 60 slips, even though you made a comment that provincial government might only allow 40, but they might allow them 60. So I'm questioning, why would we allow 2 extra at this time?
Yeah,
Or support 2 extra?
thank you, Councillor King. I would say that's just the way the numbers worked out when you actually designed the marina. Again, I think if you look at that general, and it was general and only for draft purposes only, the marina that they've designed, and it is in your public hearing, is attachment B. You'll note that they have fingers extending, or actually verse extending out towards and pointing towards the northwest. I think it would be quite likely that you not see any boats parked in there due to wave action. So again, I think 58 slips, where you just take off that last little finger there, and then you'd only have 58,
56.
56.
But I guess,
Yeah.
but that design there, I mean, it's only kind of a draft design.
Right.
Are they all coming in from the north in that design?
They're coming in, yes, so they do not cross in front of the public space. And there's also ample room in front of the subject property to have their own public, private, swimming area for kids.
With the boat?
Yeah, if you notice, even on the draft design, you don't have any of the boats
Oh,
pointed
yeah.
towards the shore, foreshore.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. I will now go to correspondence that has been received. And I will just, at the corporate officer's request, I'll just put a statement after I read each person that sent in some correspondence. So we had an email from Christopher Sharon dated March 17th, concerned about the number of motorboats on the lake and the congestion created. An email from Ed Ferreira dated March 25th, concerned about the number of marina slips being allowed and the loss of use for kayakers, paddleboarders, and swimmers. An email from Ted Cronmiller, March 26th, concerned about the erosion of the foreshore, concerned about water action of 60 additional motorboats. A letter from Dave Jones dated March 26th, concerned that the exemption is not consistent with other complexes in the area and simply does not provide an area for other water activities. Email from Bob Johnston dated March 28th, concerned about the increased number of boats, which will create difficulty to safely navigate out into the lake in a kayak or paddleboard. Email from Bob Thompson dated March 28th, concerned about the number of marina slips proposed. An email from Gary Allendon dated March 28th, concerned about the number of boats and jet skis near the public park. And an email from Wayne, Jan, Alex, and Jacob Fedden dated March 28th, concerned about the number of boat slips for the small beachfront and foreshore area. So that was 8 correspondence that we received. And I will now ask for presentations. And the first one is the applicant. So Josh Hall, is that you, and would you like to speak?
Yes, hello, Mayor and Council. Joshua Hall, 49105 Elkview Road. And thanks for taking this time. I think I'd just like to reiterate a few things that Gina had mentioned. We're looking to design a safe, functional, aesthetically pleasing marina that conforms to all provincial regulations. We had three or a few different designs that we are working for, and to view this as a draft plan, and that the final configuration and layout could, and as mentioned, will be changing. We were working with a qualified professional, Tom, who's on this call from Trademark as our consultant, has designed many docks in the area. Our priority is for it to be a safe place for swimmers and for boaters, and we want to reiterate that the design will change, and we applied for the maximum amount.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Councilor?
Yes,
Go ahead.
thank you, Mayor McCordle. I have a lot of concerns about the interaction of boats and the park area. Just to kind of elaborate on our Director of Planning, that is a very, very shallow part of the lake, and you can walk out there for a long ways. I mean, even young kids can walk out there safely for, once again, I don't know how deep it is or how far it is, but a long, long ways out there. Can you explain what the swim grid proposal is and how you would intend to protect people that are using that area for swimming and recreational purposes? Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes, through the chair. Yeah, so what we would do on that particular case with the swim grid, it would be designed as per all other swim grids that we have in our parks. It would be a municipal swim grid. It would be ours. So what they're suggesting, the applicant is suggesting, is that they would pay for that, and so that for the product and for the installation of that product to our specifications.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Wood?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Councilor Bennett.
Madam Mayor, when you say our specifications, does that say how far out? Or does that mean it's going on like down on Lake Shore where they're out 20 feet from the shore and there's a little swimming area for kids, or is it gonna be half a mile out or?
Well, thank you, Councillor Bennett. If you look, I wish I had my aerial photograph here. If you look on the Foreshore Lake zoning bylaw cover, you can see in general how they look, but I would say that Lions Park would probably be a good example. Beach Lions Park, which we're very familiar with.
My assumption is that all of the swim grids that have been put out in front of like Watermark and so on must all go out at a similar distance from the shore. Is that how they figure out?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that a high tide or low tide? Because I mean, that water even right now is kind of, I call it low tide, and it's bringing it right up to the shore as it is.
Well, thank you,
I
Councillor
don't see how you
Jane.
put
Just
sand
a
there.
little higher.
As a person that was raised on Vancouver Island, I have a different perspective on high and low tides. But I'm not sure if the representative from Trademark can speak to that, but that's a very good question.
So I see that there's a gentleman named Tom from Trademark Consulting that is on there. Would you like to speak, sir?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Or
so
can you tell us your last name, Tom? I just knew it was Tom.
yeah, it's Tom Hedquist. I'm the owner of Trademark. We've done multiple docks in your area. We do commercial docks. My background, when the floods happened, we did lots of stuff for the ministry. We did the break walls, multiple infrastructure throughout the valley and everything. So this design, of course, what Josh said, will meet or exceed. So the ministry has some pretty lots of T's across I's to dot and stuff and through their process. So I mean, as part of the design comes in, there's also the environmental, there's ARC sites, there's a multiple list. So it's a complicated process. So this design will of course meet or exceed their requirements. What Gina was saying earlier, to achieve one of their most crucial things is water depth. And what you guys touched on earlier is that is a shallow area. So we almost have to go that 30 meters period to even achieve that depth, and that's for turbidity. So when the boats actually leave there, they don't want the turbidity on the bottom. So you have to have enough water depth in low water to achieve that for any type of boat or structure out there. So a structure is deemed the dock itself. The structure can also be a boat lift. So either one of them's defined as a structure out on the water. This design is a fixed pile. So it's would have electrical in it, everything running out, pile driven with aluminum frame and a through flow or product similar to it. Josh would still have to decide on that, of course, but that would all meet the environmental side of that aspect as well. Touching base on the swimming, you can create some traffic areas for boating that can be part of the design to push people toward the north that don't even enter in toward that public area that's in question. You can do double perimeter rope lines and stuff to protect any type of boaters coming in. I believe in watermark and stuff. You guys already do that. So there is ways of preventing or having the safety side of that procedure in place already prior to anybody doing it. And then that's very common to have them swim areas defined so boaters don't go into them areas. What else could I touch on? The process itself takes about 2 years generally from when we start the application to the final approvals with this. And yeah, as far as the design, I know the neighboring properties all extend out to that 80 to 90 meters already, which Gina touched on. So trying to achieve anything within 30 meters. We build docks in your area up to 42 meters already, and that's just a ministry standard. So to try to do something in that area would almost be impossible to do it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, no problem.
So, no questions. All right, so we will go on to any of the public who might be on, and I'm not sure whether there is someone on there that would like to speak.
We have two, so.
All right,
If there's anybody on the Zoom call that wishes to speak, they should virtually raise their hand.
no,
Maybe you gotta bring them up
Oh,
first.
yes, we do. No, we can.
Oh,
so
there's
it's
one
there.
over
there.
And you said, I'm on the top.
He was one of the others.
yeah,
Yes. Wayne, you are able to speak. If you could just state your name and address, please.
Wayne Fadoon, my address is in Luna Rosa, so directly adjoining the subject property.
go ahead.
And
please.
so it's really a question based on the schematics that have been provided. What's not clear to me is that there's going to be sufficient room for a swim area in front of the subject property, given that the foreshore area is so small relative to the size of the property. And that's in part due to the fact that the public park is taking a significant portion of the foreshore area away based on the approval of the prior development and the segregation of those lands for the park. And so the concern being that one of the concerns, and there are a couple of others which I can address in short order, but the concern being is that if you don't have an attractive place for a beach area and a swim area, and you have owners looking at rows and rows of boats, they're probably going to be inclined to visit either the Soyuz Indian Band Campground Beach on the one side, the public beach on the other side, or Luna Rosa, Casa Blanco beaches that go farther along. And that the concern there is you will have crowding and concerns around conflict of those beaches. So I would be interested to understand, based on the design that's been presented to council and to interested stakeholders, how that is anticipated to work, given the 60 boat slips or 58 boat slips in a relatively small foreshore area, particularly relative to The other foreshore areas, for example, at Luna Rosa, I would say our foreshore area is probably 2 to 3 times larger, and we do have a designated area for a beach and a very safe swim area. And so I would just turn that over to the developer, I suppose, for an answer.
Get that there. Okay, I'll have to email him and go.
Thank you. I couldn't hear all of that, and I'm wondering if,
Reach out to him and
Ms.
see if
McKay,
he can
would
just ask
you-
for an update it.
is there something, Mr. Fedden, are you still speaking? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No, that's not me speaking. That is somebody else speaking.
Okay, all right. So, is there, would either Josh or Tom like to answer that, or Ms. McKay, would you?
Well, thank you, Mayor McCarthy. I think Tom did sum it up in that when he spoke about how far out they would have to go to get to the navigable waters, that obviously leaves quite a bit of space between the beach and the boating area. And again, with none of the fingers pointing towards the beach, there's no boat traffic in that area. So I'm not sure if Josh or Tom would just speak any more to that, but I do think that there's adequate area there for public play space in the beach.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Mr. Fedden?
It actually does not, because the schematic diagram that's presented is in draft form, and from what I can see, it's a very,
Mr.
very
Fedden,
small area that could use. Pardon me? Pardon me?
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Let me see if I can change my microphone too.
Is this any better?
Oh, that's
Yes, it is. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, apologies, it defaulted to my crappy laptop speaker, so sorry about that. So that was not addressing my concern, because based on a schematic diagram, it's going to be important, I think, in order to ensure that there's a viable, safe swim area for residents of the subject property, that there be some idea as to how large that swim area is going to be. You've got 58 units, as I mentioned earlier, on a relatively small servicing or having access to a relatively small foreshore area. You know, if that public park was not there, it's a different matter, because then you could have lands designated for a safe swim area, but that public park is there. And so the concern is, based on the schematic that's been provided, it's hard to understand what the area of that swim area is going to be. Like, you know, ideally, to make an informed decision, council would have some specific measurements to understand what that swim area is going to be to accommodate 58 units, you know, probably 200 or so people in that area. As far as I can tell from the diagram, it's the boats are going to be relatively close to shore, probably similar to what Luna Rosa and Casa del Lago have. But we've got separate areas that are not, you know, behind the pier and the dock. So there is, you know, room to have those kinds of swim areas that will allow people who are occupants or visitors to enjoy those areas safely. So I don't understand how, you know, there is enough information here to conclude from council's perspective that there's a sufficient swim area, that there's not going to be people utilizing other areas, you know, in addition to the swim area that's been designated for this particular property.
So what I think I got from that was that the swim area in front of the subject property is one thing that you're concerned about, and you're also concerned that some people might want to use the swim area in front of the public park.
The
That
public
is
park, yeah, and
available
also
for everybody.
and the campground on the one side and Luna Rosa, the beach on the other side. So, you know, that would be a concern of a number of residents of Luna Rosa, but I presume also, you know, any other adjoining properties. And I guess the other thing is that if the pier is going to be extended out further, I think I heard the gentleman indicate it might be up to 90 meters away from shore. That is a full 20 meters further than the existing docks at Luna Rosa, Casa del Lago, and Solavita. So you'll have a protrusion that's going to go significantly farther into the lake. And I think some of the concerns raised by other residents around kayakers and swimmers with that sort of additional 20 meters of dock. And I guess sort of the final remark, and then apologies for going on, is I don't understand what the rationale is for derogating from the density of 1 slip per 2 units here. If I presume there is some substance or meaning behind those kinds of ratios, and a 1-to-1 instead of a 1-to-2, we'll understand what the justification for that is, because I think other nearby developments have to some degree abided by those kinds of ratios, and certainly none of them are 1-to-1.
So thank you very much. I'm going to let Ms. McKay speak to this because as I asked her yesterday, many of the marinas in front of several places do not conform to, they're all different. Could you explain that, Ms. McKay, please?
Thank you, Mayor McCordoff. I just wanted to just maybe state that
Sure.
Sola Vida has 86 units and they have in excess of 43 slips, for example. Casa Lago does not have an approved marina facility.
Right.
And then, of course, I'm not going to speak to Luna Rosa because they clearly have less than they would even be permitted at 1 for every 2 upland residential units. So I would say that it runs the gamut on Cottonwood Drive. There's nobody's really exactly as written in the bylaw. So for at least for Solvita and Casa Lago to comply with the bylaw with what they've got there right now would not. It's certainly not, nor would it actually with Luna Rosa, because they do extend further than the 30 meters. That's actually permitted in the bylaw as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but I think I think my point is that with respect to the foreshore areas of these other complexes, their foreshore areas are much larger, and they do not have a 1-to-1 ratio like is being proposed here. So that I'm not understanding the rationale where you're actually compressing the number of boat slips into a much smaller foreshore area that is not going to accommodate, as far as I can tell based on a schematic that's been presented, a safe swimming area that's going to extend further into the lake than the other dock systems. And for what purpose?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fedden. I see that Josh Hall's hand is up. Would you like to speak to this, Mr. Hall?
Yes, Mayor and Council, thank you. And I actually, did talk to Wayne and other neighbors yesterday too, and had some great talks on engineering and collaborating on some of the challenges that other marinas have been built. And so I did want to collaborate with them to create the best system and obviously be a good neighbor too. I would like to address the swimming concern and just say that we have 250 plus feet of frontage there, and as our current drawn shows, we might be out that 30 meters before we even start. There'll be adequate room for people to swim, and that, as I understand, the public space is over 120 feet for that swimming area, as the previous property was almost 400 feet frontage before that park was dedicated. And that, that being open to the public is also open to, people from Luna Rosa or from our development, as it's a public park, and that's going to be a designated swim area. And so you do almost have that 400 feet of frontage along that area that will be used in a safe area for swimming. So I specifically wanted to just talk on that point that Wayne had brought up, and also say that we have talked to the neighbors, and with Tom and engineers and environmentalists and biologists that we've hired are going to create the most efficient, safe marina.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else online who would like to speak?
So if there's anybody online that wishes to speak, they need to raise their hand virtually.
Okay, so I will. Nope, I will call, I will ask the public for the first time if anyone wishes to speak to the application. I will call for a second time if anyone wishes to speak to the application. And a third time, I will ask if anyone wishes to speak to the application. And
Yes, Wayne has raised his hand.
I'm sorry, is this someone new?
Yeah.
No, he
it's
still
fine.
gets to
He
speak
can-
again.
he can speak again.
Yes, he has spoken twice, but we'll.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know if
ahead.
you wanted to hear from me. I just wanted to reply to Josh's comment and then I will be done making comments. And I did want to say, I did appreciate the conversation with Josh yesterday. We are looking to be collaborative and cooperative. But I did want to put, the issues that I have presented, which I know others, but not all others in the Luna Rosa community share. But, just to kind of summarize, the Luna Rosa property has, I think, 28 boat slips, over 500 feet of beachfront. And what we found in our experience is that people are not interested in sitting on the beach and staring at a dock and rows of boats. And so that's why we have a designated swim area that's off to the side of the dock system. And that's where people congregate. And so I just wanted to ensure that council understands that given the very small foreshore area and the increased number of slips, we're talking about slips that are, more than twice as many as what Luna Rosa, which has, a significantly more foreshore area. You are compressing those number of slips into a very small area, and there will be consequences. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So I will go through asking again. I will ask for the first time. If anyone else wishes to speak to the application, I will ask for a second time. If anyone wishes to speak to the application, and I will ask a third time if anyone wishes to speak to the application. Hearing none, I will ask for a motion, please, that the public hearing be closed. Councillor Rhodes, Councillor Harvey, all in favor. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so now we are going to look at the bylaws, and there is a motion there, and I'm wondering if a motion that the foreshore and lake zoning amendment bylaw number 1294.04 be read a third time. And if I would like to hear from council, please, on this. Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor McCarthy. I guess I'm still a little bit concerned. The problem is with me, the 58 boat slips, when I see the picture in there and some of the concerns that he just made, that Wayne did, kind of concerned me a little bit. But the problem is if you take those 58 boat slips and made that only 40, then that makes such a difference. And right now, seems like for me to go ahead and say, yeah, let's give this a third reading, we're depending on somebody in the government to say it might be 40, it might be 45, it might be 50. I don't really know what I'm voting on because I don't know what that number's going to be, and I don't know how that's going to change this picture. So I don't know what to really say on voting towards this motion.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to go ahead? Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Like all zoning amendment proposals that we get at this stage, I try to separate the zoning amendment from the potential design. And that's not what's on the table here, notwithstanding that we have a schematic from the developer for conversation purposes, as I heard our director put it. This is about, do we allow marina or not? And the specifics as to what goes in, I think can be subject of further conversation based on what we've heard today, concerns of council. But what we're voting on today is, do we allow a change to the W3 zoning to allow marina or not? The specifics of that design, beach allocation versus whatever, I think is going to be an ongoing discussion. I have my own thoughts. I wouldn't want to sit in front of a bunch of slips, sitting on the beach. I don't, I take the speaker's point on that. Are there designs that accommodate that? I also frankly have a concern, echo the concern that we have a bylaw that has a ratio that we're going to ignore. Not enforcing our own bylaws, I've seen it happen in this town and it really annoys me. And anyway, but again, that's a separate step. Here it's just, do we allow a marina, whatever the design might be, or not? And so I'm in support. In fact, I'll make a motion.
You're making a motion that we do go forward with this. So option number 1, that we grant third reading.
Yes.
Councillor Rhodes, you're seconding that
Yes.
motion? Is there anyone else? who-
I'll make a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank
Councillor
you,
Hayner.
Mayor. I guess my concern is the same as Councillor Harvey, where our bylaws is a 2-to-1 ratio, and we're really giving this development a 3-to-1 ratio. Well, just not quite, a 1-to-1 ratio,
Yeah.
sorry. In that respect, it seems quite kind of ludicrous if we don't even follow our own bylaws. Why do we have bylaws?
Can I, sorry, going.
No,
go
thank
ahead
you,
first.
Counselor King, through the chair, Mayor McCarthy. The only thing I would suggest is that you have actually granted a variance to this zone previously for another development. Just putting that out there. I appreciate that maybe the 2-to-1 is not the right ratio. I wasn't here when this particular bylaw was prepared. But I do know that a variance for the group strategy more site specific was granted to Paradise Park, for example, previously, which allowed for the placement of buoys in addition to the dock facility in the W3 zone. And I think that that is one of the reasons that we're here today, is to also prevent the placement of buoys in the lake. And so allowing for those additional slips is hopefully to help prevent that. One direction that council could do is they could also give direction to the director that when the referral comes from the province, that you recommend that the boat number of slips not exceed 40, for example, as suggested by Councillor Bennett.
I would certainly feel more comfortable with that. I am concerned about the 60 boat slips, which doesn't appear like it's going to happen. However, if we pass this, that is still a possibility. So I would certainly support the motion that's on the table, but I would definitely think that we would have to look at fewer slips, which apparently is in the works. So not 60, but down to 40 or 45. I would certainly recommend that we look at fewer slips than 60.
We have to amend the motion.
So Mayor McCarthy, if I may, actually, because you're decreasing the density, you could amend it after the public hearing, because it is a decrease in density, not an increase in density.
So let me get this right. We have a motion on the floor, which agrees with the 60 boat slips at this point.
Right, but you could amend it.
But I can't amend it. I didn't.
No,
make
I'm
the
not
motion.
suggesting, yes.
Yeah. I'm wondering if before we take the vote, if the mover and seconder are still comfortable with the motion the way it stands. What do you think? Are you okay with 60, or because that's a possibility, or would you like to have it changed with less? Go ahead, Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Mayor McCordup. I appreciate Mr. Fedden's comments. I certainly agree with a lot of his concerns. But I also see it's important for us to buy into the vision of of what's being requested by the developer and the person that will be building this facility on the water. So we have to have a balance there somewhere. In my understanding, third reading only moves it forward, but at any time we could change it. I mean, I know it's unconventional, but we certainly are empowered to make a change. So if the information that we get back is really negative, or we have to look at profound changes and that kind of thing, we are empowered to do that. If everything is decided,
Right.
that's my understanding of it. If I'm incorrect, please.
If we made a change after the fact, when they have to go back to the provincial government again.
So if I may, Mayor McCarthy, I understand that
Mr. Zacco
acting
next.
CO Zacco would like to comment. But there is two things. There's a change in the zoning from W1 to W3, and then a site specific. And the provincial process has no effect on our bylaws. The provincial process, which they've undertaken to apply, what happens is after they've done their due diligence, I get a referral from the province, and they ask me to speak to the proposal.
Go ahead, Mr. Zacco.
Giving it third reading and then wanting to make further changes before consideration of adoption, you're having to rescind third reading, make changes.
So it
It's,
would be better to make the changes now before you do third reading.
the council's vision is to see a smaller number of units that they're more comfortable with, that comes closer to our guidelines and our bylaws. It might be better to do it sooner than later.
Okay.
Because through the provincial process, we're getting a referral process, but council's lost the ability to make those changes other than provide input. Council's ability right now is to make the decision on the bylaw.
Go ahead, Councilor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My concern would be too, if we're even thinking about reducing the amount, whatever number, is that we don't get these gentlemen going to spending all our money doing everything based on 60 slips, which could mean a lot more, maybe than 40 slips as far as geotech and all the applications. So we've gone through the whole process to do 60, they come back and 60, and then we go back and say, well, you only need 40. Are they spending a bunch more money? Well, I have about 60 as far as they do all this plan design, everything based on 60, and then we come back and say, now it's only 40. That changes this whole plan.
So we do have a motion on the table, and if that we amend this as printed. And so I think if we're ready, we can ask for all the people that, go ahead, Councillor Rhodes.
So there was it was brought up asking for a friendly amendment. I didn't hear what it was. So is that option gone, or?
Well, that's what I was asking mover and seconder. If you would like to make a friendly amendment now, or we could vote on this and then depending on what happens, go ahead, Councillor.
No, I'm not actually willing to entertain that. I mean, this is a development for private buyers and residents, and it's up to Josh and his shop to market it. And if he can't sell a single one because there's too many damn slips, then whose problem is that? Right? And so I'm inclined to give him the rope at 60, and it's in many respects, it's a private enterprise, and the success in marketing these things is, in that space. And I'm not comfortable putting an arbitrary constraint on it, notwithstanding my comments about not complying with our bylaws.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Similarly, I feel exactly the same way. If we knew what the result was going to be, that would be a lot different. I would be more supportive of it. I think changing it right now or not passing it, this is me speaking in favor of the motion, could possibly enhance, it could close the deal down. I mean, I don't know how they operate. I get a good sense from our planning director that these folks that are trying to do this have been acting very professionally. They seem to know what they're doing. She has not indicated anything of a negative nature at all. That would have changed the whole complex of it, but I don't feel that. I feel good and positive. I think the concerns from the public can be addressed and worked through like they have been with many other proposals like this. And so I'm comfortable, and I would not support a change to it.
Okay. So the motion stands on the floor, option number 1, that we grant third reading to this zoning amendment bylaw. I will ask the question then, all in favor? Against? Okay, so that was passed. So thank you very much. We will now go to, we're finished with that. We will go to the in-camera section. Am I correct? So, yes, go ahead.
I'm curious about next steps with this proposal. What is the time frame? If you don't know, I mean, that's acceptable as well. Just wondering how long this is going to be before we get to say final.
Right, so I appreciate that, Councillor Rhodes, thank you again through the chair. Pardon me, I mean, I could bring back a motion to adopt the bylaw as it sits with no further information provided, or I, of course, could wait for a final design from Tom and his team, and recommendation from Josh that they're ready to share what their vision is. But as Councillor Harvey points out, it doesn't really have any effect on the bylaw at this point. They'll use best practices, and the province will make final approval of the design. So that's generally the way it works.
So are you asking if it was going to come back in a month or 2 months, or how is that what the point of your?
Well,
yeah.
So often we leave these things open and we don't know where we're going next or what time frame we're looking at. That was my question, the specific something or not.
Right, I could certainly thank you again through the chair to Councillor Rhodes. I could certainly bring something back to May for this.
In May, is that what you said?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Does that answer your questions? Okay. So we will now move into in camera, and I need a mover and seconder, please, that pursuant to section 91C of the community.
Maybe I should buy them people.
No, we'll do that.
We'll do this first.
No, I'm sorry.
91C of the community charter, council meeting be closed to the public as the subject matter relates to labor relations or other employee relations. The motion, Councillor Bennett, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.